how did you guys manage that many kids? Like, how did you get places? Like, okay, we're all going to the library. Like, did you just have a really big van? Or like, did you guys do the buddy system thing that I've heard the Duggars do?
It was very emotional getting back. Wait a second, we had a couple of neighbors. Oh, we don't see their roof. And then we're like, we don't see our roof. So with the debris cloud, it was 3 miles
Holy Toledo.
But then the funnel itself, I don't remember if it was 1.5 miles or 2 miles wide, the funnel itself.
That's insane.
My parents just felt so, honestly, burdened by their belongings. That was what was keeping them from pursuing what they felt God was calling them to do. We as a culture are already so segregated. There used to be, I believe, a lot more cross-generational relationships and just community and everything else. Opposite ends of the spectrum, and people kind of get left out, you know, when you're new and inconvenient and a little bit noisy. And then you have the opposite end of the spectrum of people when they are advanced in age, maybe don't have all their faculties about them. And it's just, you know, it's an inconvenience. So let's just like put them away.
But I feel like people will quote unquote use it as an excuse. Like, I came from this traumatic childhood. I don't want to carry the trauma on. And you're right, you don't have to. Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. And if you are listening to this or watching it, I guess either way it counts, welcome to my first new podcast. This is so exciting. We're calling it the NikkiPhillippi podcast just because, I don't know, original, roll with it. And I'm excited because today I have my good friend with me, Miss Maria Hardman. Yay! So I'm super excited to interview Maria because I feel like I need to give this little preface and like kind of explain what we're gonna be talking about today. So, growing up in California, you guys know if you've watched me for a long time, I am originally a Los Angeles native. And coming from Los Angeles, literally the largest family I knew, I'm not kidding, they had 4 kids. And I know a lot of people, like just in general in my life, and I had never met a family with more than 4 kids. Now, leaving California, that changed. I started meeting like a little bit bigger families in Tennessee, like 5 kids. But even out there, I think maybe being in the city, I didn't really meet many families with more kids. And then once I moved to Idaho, I started meeting a lot more families with more kids. And particularly Miss Maria, she is one of the first people I met when I moved here, and we just gelled and clicked really well. And Maria is the oldest of 11 children. So kind of crazy, kind of wild, kind of awesome, which is really the main reason I wanted to talk to her today. When I was pregnant, I was I was really sick. We all know that. And I watched 19 Kids and Counting twice. Like all of the episodes, I watched it through twice. I kind of became obsessed with the Duggars. I listened to all of the Duggars books also twice. And I just became really fascinated with this whole idea of large families and how different life looks, I think, when you are in a larger family. And just kind of the concept in general of how much life has really changed for so many people, what family looks like now, how much family life has changed. And so now that I gave that long spiel, I brought Maria on because I want to talk about what life looked like for her, being the oldest of 11 children, what her experiences were like, what her thoughts are like. And so welcome, Maria, to the NikkiPhillippi podcast.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, so Maria, first question, this is the most vague question. How was it growing up in a family of 11 children?
Well, whenever somebody asks me that, or they, when they first find out that that was my growing up experience, I always say I loved it. And it's true. I mean, I absolutely loved it. It was amazing. It still is amazing. I love, now, like as we're all getting older and, just the fact that I have such a support group within my family, that my family are some of my best friends.
That's so cool.
It's just, so it was,
It's
short
what you
story.
know.
Short story. Yeah, it's what I know, but I really loved it.
Yeah.
And the other thing I always say is I feel like it was one of the, greatest gifts my parents could have given to me.
Okay, that statement right there in and of itself is, I feel like, very counter to what I guess we could say like culture in general kind of pushes. There's this whole idea, I feel like, that I see, and we talked about this a little bit in voice messages, that I'll see out there of like, you don't want to like parentify the child. And I don't mean to completely downplay it because I think that that exists. But in my mind, the way that I see it is I think parentification is really only a thing, or like a serious thing, issue, if that's how we want to put it, when you're a child of like a family where there's alcoholism, some kind of drug abuse, and you're essentially having to take over that parental role. But I think that this idea of like parentification just by being a sibling in the family, like I don't really agree with that concept in general. I think it's like part of preparing you for adulthood. So just that is really interesting to me.
Yeah.
That you feel like they gave you a gift.
Yeah. Well, and I will say that, every family dynamic is different. And so I definitely did see family, like new families growing up, where there wasn't those extreme circumstances that you were just mentioning.
Yeah.
And there was, I would say, too much.
Gotcha. Parentification. Too much put on the kids.
The children. But that was definitely not my experience. And I know that I have known a lot of large families. Kind of part of being from a large family is you tend to
know other large families.
You tend to know other large families. Yeah. And so I can say that is definitely not always the case. And I wouldn't even say like half of the time the case. It just...
Of like the kids having to be like the parents, you're saying that's usually not the case.
Yes. Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Would you say that most of the families that you guys have interacted with, and part of it might be like, you're choosing who you interact with, but still I'm just curious. Would you say that most of them are like, okay, how do I word this? When I read the Duggar books, something that really stood out to me was that I felt like the way that the parents talked and the way that they talked about raising their kids, it was very like, I don't know, like good people, like very self-reliant, responsible, teaching their kids lots of skills. It wasn't like this other thing that can be painted in the media of like living off of government assistance, neglecting the kids, just letting them run wild and raise themselves. Did you find that too, that like a lot of them were like teaching them really useful skills?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure. And again, like the specifics of that, family to family varies, of course, because every family, their circumstances as far as where they live and just what they prioritize is different. There's just such a wide spectrum of what people prioritize in regards to, like trying to raise their kids to be well-functioning adults.
Yeah, members of society, responsible members of society.
Yes.
Yeah, and you can obviously, by the way, you can take sips anytime you want. I feel like I'm always taking sips of my drink.
Water as well.
All right, so we are taking a break for our very first sponsor of today's podcast episode, and that is Honeymark. To those of you that haven't heard me talk about Honeymark yet, get ready because I am low-key obsessed. Honeymark makes the absolute best modest swimwear. And the reason that I say it is the absolute best is because I have been wearing their swimwear now for 3 years, and it is incredible. So not only is it so cute, yes, there is a lot of cute modest swimwear out there, though I think Honeymark's is like some of the cutest. Not only is it so cute, but it also is so high quality. So I have bought other modest swimwear in the past, and I've been honestly pretty disappointed, mostly because of the fabric. I have said this before, but Honeymark's fabric is like magic. It dries so fast. So you would think like with more fabric on swimwear that when you get out of the water, it would just be like extra sopping wet and cold and like sagging low. And you would be correct in thinking that when it comes to other modest swimwear that I have tried. But with Honeymark, it is incredible because it drip dries so fast. For some reason, the fabric like doesn't stretch. I have the same Honeymark swimwear that I got a few years ago, and I will still wear it because even after wearing it, I don't even know, man, like over 100 times, the suit actually still fits the same. So it hasn't stretched out over time with water. And that is exactly what the previous modest swimwear I bought did. I was only able to wear it a few times, and the fabric actually completely stretched out from the weight of the water to where it wasn't even wearable anymore. So I'm such a huge fan of Honeymark. I can't recommend them enough. They're great for chasing after your kids. The top is super supportive. You can wear them to church camp. Amazing. I have a discount code Nikki10 for 10% off of your order. So if you want to check them out, I will link them down below, and thank you in advance if you shop with my link. Back to the interview. Growing up, you mentioned to me that your parents had a very like specific conviction of like leaving it up to God how many kids they were going to have. Did you know that when you were little? Like, okay, like more siblings could come at any point.
Yes, we did, because they talked about it all the time. They talked so positively about parenthood and us as children. And I mean, we knew that we were blessings to them and not burdens, like, because they very much vocalized that, not only to us, but then, of course, when you come from a larger family and when you go out in public, like, you know, our parents didn't hide us away. We, growing up, like, our mom took us everywhere. You know, we went shopping together. We went, I mean, just, you know, everywhere together. The library together, to church together, to, you know, just any social, to restaurants together. But anytime we were out in public, you know, you'd always get
comments.
Always get people staring and counting, for sure. like we're little ducklings.
Oh, that's so cute.
But then also we would always get comments without fail. And a lot of times they were positive. You know, I remember that pretty much anytime we were in a restaurant, somebody would, you know, come up and be like, oh, your children are so well behaved. Like, you have such a beautiful family, something like that. Yeah. But there were definitely the people that would come up and they just wanted to say something negative.
People would say negative things to you in person?
Oh, to my parents. Yeah, like with us standing right there.
What? I'm like shocked right now.
I mean, one of the worst comments. Now, granted, this person was actually drunk.
Okay, that changes it.
Was actually drunk.
To it.
It was very early in the morning, so it was like, okay, this is odd.
Oh, that is odd. We're day drinking. Okay.
Yeah. And he made a comment. He saw my mom with all of us kids, and he made a comment comparing her to a rabbit.
Oh, that's pleasant.
Like, oh, you multiply like rabbits.
Oh my gosh. You're like, okay.
You know, just...
Great, thanks.
Like, yeah.
Yeah, that's... Wow, I'm shocked that people would say things to you in person. Like
or even, you know, the classic ones that probably anybody who has, you know, more than 3 children or 4 has heard is like, oh, don't you have a TV? Don't you have, you know... Yeah. With us standing right there, or like, oh, you have your hands full. That one's not as bad.
Yeah,
but,
exactly.
You know.
You know, something really interesting that I've found interesting about you since I met you, and I feel like this probably has to do with the fact that you have 10 siblings, so you've seen a lot of different kids grow up with different personality types. Yeah. And even though you're from the same family, obviously we know that, like, lots of personalities can exist in the same family. But I feel like, and ever since I've met you, and, you know, Logan is a great little kid, don't get me wrong, but, like, I'm a first-time mom, and I only have, well, I have 3 siblings, but my brother came into our life really once I moved out of the house. But I would get, like, self-conscious about, like, behavioral things, like, oh, sorry that happened, or sorry this happened, and I never felt like judged by you. I always felt like you were very calm and just like, oh, that's part of being a kid. And like, I almost don't even know how to word it other than me maybe connecting these dots of like, oh, you've seen probably a lot of stuff by having 10 siblings. Yes. And I feel like that kind of ties to what you said to me in a voice message the other day about how you feel like having all these siblings really helped prepare you for life in general.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And just like your awareness of people and how to be an adult.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I have thought so many times since I've been married for over 6 years now, just that I feel like the upbringing I had prepared me so greatly for marriage because in all honesty, I mean, my husband, Brian, he is an amazing person. So,
yeah, he's not a child,
yeah,
so
yeah,
that
helps not marrying a child.
Yeah, you know. But you're like used to handling different scenarios or problems or people and
yeah, and I mean honestly getting married was such an easy, honestly, transition in my life. And I attribute so much of that to just like I grew up with a lot of other people in the same household, and you learn how to not only live day to day with one another, but conflict resolution and how to work together as a team to accomplish different things as a household, and you know, just the things that need to happen every day, like oh, meals need to be made and clothes needs to be washed and the house needs to be put in order, you know.
Yeah, for a lot of people. That's why I'm moving. Like my mom and I, we were talking about this. I don't know. We've talked about this a few times, right? Because neither of us, I mean, she only came from, she had 2 siblings. So same thing, family of 3.
Yeah.
Even though I'm family of 4 kids, like I said, it mostly feels like 3 because of that's how I was raised. It was just the 3 of us. We literally can't picture the logistics. Now, granted, since I've become obsessed with the Duggars, okay, I can actually picture the logistics a bit more because they've talked a little bit about them. But there have been times where my mom and I have literally looked at each other and we're like, how? Like, how does someone do this? So my question to you, this is also vague, feel free to go off in whatever direction you want. But like, how did you guys manage that many kids? Like, how did you get places? Like, okay, we're all going to the library. Like, did you just have a really big van? Or like, did you guys do the buddy system thing that I've heard the Duggars do? Like, how did you cook these huge meals? Like, how did you handle having that many kids in the house?
Well, it's definitely, you definitely can't just like fly by the seat of your pants with that many people and expect that, you know, everything's just going to be smooth sailing.
Okay.
So my mom had to be very organized. And I say my mom, like, you know, she was a stay-at-home mom. My dad was the provider. He had his own businesses. So there were phases in our life where his work, you know, he was able to be working mainly from home. But for the most part, you know, in the day-to-day, you know, like, I don't know what you would say working hours of the day. Mom was the one, you know, handling that. So when I say, you know, it's both of them, but
your mom was handling the day-to-day stuff that I'm like shocked about.
Yes. You know, very organized, particularly during the school year. You know, we had a master schedule and she would, you know, spend all this time putting it together, you know, before the school year started because we were homeschooled. And it entailed, you know, everything from our academic schedule to, you know, nap time, meal time, you know, when food got really prepped, when, you know, when we tidied up the house, you know, in transition times. And so there's that aspect. Meal planning, again, she would plan out meals. I remember phases where she would plan out meals for like a month at a time.
Whoa! So she was a super meal prepper.
Yeah, at the start of the month, she would plan out every single dinner for the month. And we would actually spend like 2 days prepping as much food as we could and getting it in the freezer.
Okay, so she utilized the freezer a lot. Okay.
Yeah, we would prep as much as we could in like a 2 to 3 day chunk or something.
Wow.
And then get it in the freezer, and we, you know, that just removed one layer of complexity, I guess. To the day of, well, all the meals are already planned out for the next 30 days. So there was that aspect. We did have a large vehicle. We had multiple different large vehicles through the years, you know.
Yeah, so I assume that as more kids came, you just kept having to like upgrade at a certain point.
Yes. I don't fully, I think I remember the transition to maybe like a 12-passenger van. That was when I was younger. And then we actually got a Dodge Sprinter van, like the first one that came to...
Those are like the big boxy ones, right? Okay.
Yes. And so we actually transitioned from the 12-passenger to that, which was honestly worked a lot better, just the way they're laid out than the 12-passenger vans. Also, we lived in Oklahoma at the time, and it had a much better air conditioner in it than 12-passenger vans do. And so for the summertime, I remember that was the big thing as a kid. It was like, oh my goodness, it has an air conditioner that works really efficiently.
Wow, that's so wild.
Versus the 12-passenger, which just
has like the little vents up in the corner.
Yeah, the air conditioning is not great.
Because the Sprinter van is more for like, typically for like work stuff that people are doing, huh?
Yeah,
like
I guess.
Events.
I'm trying to think back to like when they first, you know, came out. I mean, everybody knew us just because of our vehicle, because we were the only Sprinter van in the Oklahoma City
That's so
area.
funny. Yeah, and how long did you guys lived in Oklahoma till, what was it, like 12 years ago, 13 years ago?
Until 2011.
Okay, I mean, this isn't really part of the big family story, but I feel like it's worth mentioning that like you guys lived most of your life. I know you were in New Mexico when you were really little, right? Yes. And then you moved to Oklahoma when you were like toddler-ish age?
Yeah, I was about 4.
Okay, and then you were there were you in...
About 10 years.
On the same farm?
No. So we were in neighborhoods for, I guess, 3 years until I was 7 years old.
Okay.
And at that point then my parents decided to, well, not at that point, but they had, for a while, they had wanted to get property, move out of town. There were very specific reasons for that, like things that they had noticed with children and young people, youth that had grown up like in the country and on property and, you know, with animals, you know, that sort of thing.
I remember your dad talking about that last time I saw it, and how he just stared seeing the differences, and he's like, that's what I want to do with my kids. Yeah. It's so cool. So they like went for it.
So when I was 7, we actually downsized in home size and to a smaller home, but it was on 5 acres, just absolute, or 6 acres, absolute dream property for a kids that age, you know?
Yeah.
And there was also the twofold purpose there of my parents were also seeking to get out of debt. And so downsizing to a smaller home, you know, it was also allowing them to work towards that goal as well. Yeah. So they didn't have like this massive, you know.
Yeah. I remember that's the other thing your dad said, not only wanting to get out of the country, but also just feeling like, oh man, the thought just flew away. Not the debt,
I know what you're saying. I know what you're trying, the priority.
Yes. Thing. Wow. Yes. Okay. There we go.
Yes.
The priorities, just saying like, oh, we used to have like these super nice fancy houses in town, but then realizing I wanted to get land. It was actually because we were talking about the show Yellowstone, and he was saying he's like, most people in the country don't live like that because land is actually expensive, and machinery and animals and all of that is expensive. So the money went more towards that versus like the nice home. Yeah. But he wanted that like country lifestyle for you guys and all the lessons and everything that entails.
Yeah. So that was kind of our transition then from living the suburban, you know, neighborhood life to then we moved to property, and I mean, we just absolutely thrived. You know, we got goats, we got some horses and a pony, and
you had not ridden horses before that?
No, I had like, you know, on vacation or something, you know.
Okay, but you weren't like a serious rider.
No, we didn't have like anybody in our life that, you know, had horses or whatnot, but it had always actually been a dream of my mom's ever since she was a little girl. Like ever since she was a young girl, like every birthday, every Christmas, she would ask for a horse. And that dream was never realized during her childhood, but it was something that she kind of wanted to pass on to her children. So when we had opportunities, if we were, you know, camping in the mountains or something, and there was somewhere where you could go horseback riding, like she tried to...
Melissa, what's on it?
Yeah, she tried to make that happen for us. So that we could have some exposure, and it was kind of a vicarious, like, her realizing her dream. And then once we got horses, you know, it was a special thing for her too, of like, being able to give her kids the childhood that she wanted in that regard. In that way.
I mean, your parents it's a trip. Sorry, by the way, side note, the sun is changing. We are in fall weather. You're going to see light fluctuate a little bit in and out. Anyways, something that is really awesome and trippy and like admirable, all the things to me about your parents, is that they basically created, and it's obviously like a blessing from the Lord, because if it's not what God has for you, then, you know, you can want all you want. It's not going to happen. But, you know, if we take the part that they did in their life, that they basically created the life that they wanted on the one hand, right? She wanted horses. They wanted this country life. On the other hand, it's also a trip to me. I don't know. You tell me if this is not allowed to be said. I feel like your mom's pretty open, but whatever, you tell me. That like when they got married, your mom didn't even think she wanted kids.
Oh yeah.
From not wanting kids to 11 kids is such a trip.
Yeah, she was adamant that she didn't want to have children, and she's very open about that. She has shared her personal testimony many times through the years, and there were many reasons for that. Part of that was she had a very broken like household upbringing. She was one of 2 children, and just came from a very broken household. She didn't want to get married because she thought like all men were liars, and just like the whole that whole
Viewpoint.
Yeah, viewpoint. And her and my dad met and they got married and basically did not talk about anything before they got married. They just met and were like, they knew that they were each other's person.
Yeah.
And I think like their second date, first or second date, dad told her, I'm going to marry you. And she's like, yeah, you are.
Yep, we're each other's person. Yeah.
And so they didn't even discuss kids
so
or anything
wild.
before they got married.
And it's funny because that's never the advice you would give someone.
No.
You'd be like, you need to talk through but it's really a testament on that note to like what God can do through marriages, through relationships. That's so beautiful and amazing.
Well, and even just the transformation of salvation, because my mom was not a Christian
that's right.
when my parents got married.
Yeah.
My father had been raised in a Christian home, but he had, at the time they had met, he had like fallen away and, wasn't actively pursuing God's will for his life.
Yeah.
And so it was actually his parents, my paternal grandparents, that witnessed to my mother.
Wow.
And soon after my parents were married, my mom became a Christian. And at that point, it was like a wake-up call for my dad he'll say that he thought, man, here's this woman that I claim to love, and I didn't even share the gospel with her. It just really hit him that like, oh, wow, it was his parents that did it.
Yeah.
And so...
Praise God.
Yeah, there was this transformation process that took place.
I'm back for our next sponsor of the video, and that is Equip. I love Equip. So I have been trying to find a good protein powder for years now, and I'm sure there are lots of great protein powders out there, but for me personally, all of the protein powders that I have tried within recent years have actually hurt my stomach. I'll either like get bloated or a weird gurgly feeling or like sharp pains in my stomach, and the Equip protein powder is amazing for me because I get none of that. I get zero bloating. I get zero like gross protein powder feeling vibes from drinking it. It's so amazing. It's so tasty. I actually love mixing their peanut butter flavor with their chocolate flavor because that way I can do like a little bit extra. I can almost do 2 scoops in a shake with like some raw milk and a little bit of ice. It's absolutely incredible, and it's been helping me meet my protein goals. The other amazing thing about Equip, and this is the reason why I think my body likes Equip so much, is because the ingredients are very simple. So the protein source is actually just dehydrated beef. So for me, I mentioned not only getting stomach pains, but the other thing that would happen is I would actually break out. So like whey protein for me makes me break out like crazy. I don't know why. It just does. And this stuff not only feels amazing, I don't get any breakouts from it. Super simple ingredients. It is sweetened with stevia, so if you're not a stevia fan, know that. But they actually have an unflavored version that does not have stevia in it. So I have a friend that loves the unflavored version, and she'll just put like fruit, the unflavored protein powder, maple syrup, or honey in there, and that is delicious as well. So I highly, highly, highly recommend Equip. If you use my code NikkiP, you will get 15% off of your order, and I am pretty sure you will love it as much as I do. I hope you do. You have to let me know if you check them out, and thank you in advance if you use my link. Back to the interview.
People who grow up so long without Christ in their life, like, I mean, I keep saying imagine, but I can only imagine what the transformation must be in their heart. What I think it's a gift in its own way to live a certain amount of life, seeing the world without the Lord, and then having a brand new, like you're baptized, you are just, you see the world completely differently. And I think that maybe it's not that, and this is part of what we're talking about, it's not that like necessarily 11 kids, it's like, that's radical, though it is radical nowadays, that's kind of part of the conversation. But it is, I think maybe it can cause you to see things a little more radically because you've lived so much of your life without seeing things through, am I making sense? Like through the Lord's
I think you are.
viewpoint.
I think you are.
Okay, good. Hopefully I get my gist.
Yeah, especially, like for both of us where we grew up.
Raised that way.
We were raised that way. And so we have, boring testimonies.
Yeah, it's it's a blessing, it's a gift, but it's just a different experience.
Yeah. But then I have, and you as well, I know, we've both gained the perspective from our parents who did not grow up that way, of them sharing like, no, not only is this what the Bible says and what God has laid out as his I guess you could say, perfect plan for people.
Yeah.
You know, people can look at the Bible as like, oh, it's just a bunch of rules or whatever. But my parents really raised us with the perspective of, okay, this is the reason why.
Yeah, it's for your
God,
benefit.
Yeah, it's
for your
it's
good.
for your benefit.
It's not
for your
to
good.
squish
This is,
you.
Yeah, this is the reason why behind these different things in the Bible. And like they have firsthand experience because of their history.
Yes.
And so it gave me and all of my siblings, I know, a different perspective than maybe some children who are raised in like generational Christian homes.
Totally. Yes, I get what you mean.
Because we were told, well, yes, this is why why the Bible emphasizes the importance of X, Y, and Z, because these are the real life consequences of going against that.
Yes, and then on the flip side, these are the benefits of going with that.
Exactly.
Yeah, and for me, it was the opposite. My dad was not raised a believer. He was basically, I mean, he was a hardcore atheist.
Yeah.
And my mom was raised in church, but it was the same thing where she had kind of like gone off and was doing her own thing. And then they got together and they kind of came back to and to Christ together, but especially my dad. I mean, I filmed on my channel. If you guys hadn't seen it, you should check it out because it's awesome. My dad, I talked with him about his testimony, and it really is incredible. Like the journey of, once again, seeing life without Christ and then having that baptism and then seeing life with Christ. Yeah. It just, apparently, according to him, which it makes sense, is dramatically different.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's wild. So he found out that night, okay, she doesn't want any kids. This is crazy.
Yeah.
And did they end up talking their way through this, or was there just kind of, did she slowly have a change of heart, or do you know?
You know, I'm not exactly sure how
that happened.
That conversation took place. I do know she has shared that this pivotal moment or encounter that she had that made to where she had this switch and she's like, okay, I'm ready for a baby.
Let's hear it.
She was at the grocery store and this little, I believe it was a little girl, very young, you know, like toddler age, got separated from her mom and came up and grabbed onto like my mom's leg or her hand or something, thinking that my mom was her mom.
Yeah.
And of course, when the little girl looked up and realized it wasn't her mom, like she, you know, ran away, you know, like frightened or whatever. But my mom said that when that little girl touched her, that it was like electricity went through her body, like shivers, you know, and it was just this physical response. And she went home and she told my dad, I'm ready to have a baby.
Oh, isn't that wild? I feel like a lot of women have a moment where it's like all of a sudden I'm ready. Mine was on Instagram. I just saw this girl's picture and something about seeing it in that moment. I was like, and for me it was, you know, whatever. We don't need to go off on my story. I was in the middle of an adoption journey. There was a lot going on, but then I had this moment, similarly, not being touched on Instagram, but where I had like electricity through my body. I was like, I don't think I am ready to wave my fertility goodbye.
Yeah. So the time span from them getting married to them having me was actually just a little over 2 years. So there really wasn't actually that long of a transition from like, don't want to have any kids on my mom's part to having a baby.
Yeah. Okay, so, and they had you in New Mexico, moved to Oklahoma when you were, did you say 4 or 7?
Yes, 4.
4. But you moved into the country when you were like 7-ish.
Yes.
Okay. Now this is the part, it doesn't really have, it does, I think, because our whole story works together, but this is something I learned about Maria like first time I met her, and I was like, whoa. When they were living in Oklahoma, their house got destroyed by a tornado, like the whole thing, and they lost their animals, their horses, just the whole thing was completely destroyed. I don't know if you want to kind of tell your version of that.
Sure. So in a nutshell,
not your version, but your story.
That's my perspective.
Yeah, your perspective.
In a nutshell, when I was 14, F5 tornado came through, destroyed a lot of homes in the rural, across the state, but you know, in our specific community especially.
Yeah.
And we lost like 97% of our belongings.
That is so wild.
So we were displaced as a family of...
Did you have much notice, when it was coming through? Like, okay.
Yeah, that's the question everybody always asks, so I'm glad you asked that.
Okay.
We left 11 minutes before it hit.
11 minutes. Where did you go?
We went to my grandparents' house. So they lived 10 minutes away, but they were in the direction that it seemed like the path of the storm was going to be headed. And so there was this, I mean, there are so many details surrounding this story of God's very obvious hand at work, protecting us. And I mean, honestly, I believe preserving our lives. Like my dad was supposed to be out of town on a work trip, like in Washington, D.C. When it hit, and like the weekend before, he's like, I can't go for some reason. And my mom, it made no sense.
Like whatever led up to that. Like, did he just get a feeling, or did something happen?
Yeah, he just had a feeling. Like there was absolutely nothing.
Nothing happened. He was just like, I don't think I should go.
He was going on this business trip to finalize a business deal that he had put months into trying to bring to pass, and would have meant, exponential growth for his company. And I mean, just like very, I guess you could say, different lifestyle.
Yeah.
A lot more.
And God just
income.
gave him a feeling.
And God just gave him a feeling, and he, praise God, responded to that. And even though he didn't have anything concrete, and he stayed. And the reason why, praise God, he did is my mom says that she doesn't feel like she would have had the confidence to drive through the storm. To leave to go to my grandparents, because the reason why we were going to my grandparents, I should say this, is they had an underground storm shelter, whereas the home we were in, it was newer. We had only been there for 2 years, and we hadn't put one in yet. And so they were saying, like, on the news, they're in Oklahoma, they have, very advanced tracking,
because this is a frequent
systems
occurrence.
And whatnot for the tornadoes. And so they were tracking it and could see the path and be like, okay, it's going to hit this road at 5:52 and this road at, 6 o'clock and, type of thing. But they were saying on the reports that this is not a, like, get in your bathtub, cover yourself with a mattress, or get in a closet type of tornado. Like, you need to be underground, or you're basically dying.
Yeah.
That's not what they were saying on TV. But
but that was the gist.
But that was the gist.
Take this seriously.
And so, my parents were deliberating back and forth. My dad didn't really want to leave because, like I said earlier, the path that the tornado that they were tracking of how they thought it was going to go was actually going to be going right through the town that my grandparents lived in. And we lived 10 minutes outside of that town. And so it looked like it was going to miss us completely. But my mom was like, I just really would feel better if we were underground. So we all loaded up. We drove through the storm. It was a wild drive getting to my grandparents. The wind.
Oh my gosh.
Super crazy, pelting rain, hail, just like.
And how many of you were there at that time? Because not all your siblings were.
10 siblings.
Oh, so you were just minus one.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So all 10 kids and parents loaded in the car, or the van, the Sprinter van, and headed off to grandma's.
And as it turns, we made it there safely, and as it turns out, the tornado actually changed direction. And so it mostly missed the town where my grandparents lived. And hit our home. And, a lot of the homes that were kind of situated outside of that town.
And how long did it take till you knew what had happened? Like, did you not know till you left? Like, okay, the tornado's gone, let's go back. And then you came upon it?
Yeah, so the way that kind of unrolled is we were at my grandparents, we got out of the storm shelter. It's like, oh, it's kind of, cleared out. It was like the calm after the storm or whatever. And most of my siblings actually decided they wanted to have a sleepover at my grandparents'. And we had, like, grabbed, changes of clothes to bring with us. And so most of them stayed, and my parents were like, well, we should probably just, head back and, just check, make sure everything's okay,
Oh, dude.
And so I went with them, and I want to say it must have been probably the youngest at the time.
Okay, so most of them stayed behind.
Yeah, it was me and one other sibling. I don't remember who it was.
And do you feel like that was better, side note, in retrospect, that they weren't all there?
Probably. It was very emotional getting back.
Okay, go on.
As where we lived in Oklahoma, it was very flat, the kind of the open plains, a lot of ranching. And so when we were a mile or two away from our house, like, you used to be able to see way across the field, like our rooftop, I keep touching the mic.
Oh, you're okay. Yeah.
Our rooftop, but we're getting closer and we're like, wait a second, we don't see like our different we had a couple of neighbors. Oh, we don't see their roof. We don't, and then we're like, we don't see our roof. And we had to, take a different route actually to get back to our home because there were roads closed off by emergency personnel already.
Wow.
From like downed trees, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. Or uprooted trees that had been transported.
Holy
because
Toledo.
that's the way it went. But then we got onto our road and like one of our horses was dead, like mangled in the dirt there. And then one of the other ones, she was actually still standing. And this was honestly the most emotional part for me, as a 14-year-old girl. Honestly, in the moment, I could have cared less to like my home and everything that I
Really,
owned
it didn't
was
even. It was just
was
kinda
gone.
like,
It was the horse, my horses, because they were so important to me. Like probably any 14-year-old girl who has horses could relate to.
Yeah.
And so my mom and I, we like got out of the vehicle and we went running over to our one horse that was like standing in the road, and there was already a bunch of emergency personnel and neighbor, just like people wanting to help out that were there, and there were people on the other side of her that were waving their arms to my mom going, don't bring her over here, and it was the side opposite of us was just so mangled, and like her leg, she had broken legs, that sort of, or a broken leg, anyhow.
Yeah, like really not.
Yeah, so she had to be put down, and I'm just like sobbing. It's so sad. I felt really bad too because I hadn't like let the horses go, which is kind of one of the things. If you grow up in tornado country, it's like, okay, well, if you know a storm's coming, like let your animals go so that they can run free, potentially get out of the way, But this particular tornado,
I mean, that's fast. You said that after you left, it was like 11 minutes, you guys think?
And the size of it, if I'm remembering correctly, so with the debris cloud, it was 3 miles
Holy
around.
Toledo.
That was but then the funnel itself, I don't remember if it was 1.5 miles or 2 miles wide, the funnel itself.
That's insane.
So, I mean, it was massive. There would have been no way that.
Whoa.
And so, yeah, that was, but
in the moment, you didn't necessarily know that. So you're like, I should have.
No.
I
mean, I was 14 and,
exactly.
it's just like very sad. Felt like it was my fault that my horses were dead.
Yeah.
But, just praise God, we were all safe because there were people just a mile or two away from us that lost 2 children. Like the baby was literally ripped out of the mom's arms.
I can't even imagine.
I mean, they had search, helicopters out for days looking for the one baby. And it was so sad, and we were like, yeah, of course it's a bummer and very inconvenient, especially for a family of our size to lose all your stuff. But
but it's just stuff.
We were struck with the gravity of, wow, but we're still
safe.
alive. We're all together. Things can be replaced.
Oh my gosh.
And God, immediately began providing for us. We had so many garbage bags full of clothes that were immediately given to us. The church in the town was set up to be, kind of a resource center, like people would donate stuff there. And if you were affected by the tornadoes, like had lost your home or whatever, you could go there and whatever you needed, they would get for you. Like we needed a pack and play for my youngest sister at the time to sleep in because she was a little over a year old. And we were displaced, and so they didn't have one when we went in there, but they found somebody who, gave one to us.
Wow.
And we had somebody we knew, like a bachelor literally moved out of his home, and people stocked it with everything we needed. And we moved into his home for a couple of weeks.
That is incredible.
Yeah.
To see the way people come together and the way God provides in those emergencies is breathtaking.
Yeah. So that was not a nutshell.
Yeah, but that's as much of a nutshell as you're going to get right now, okay? Yeah, okay. So I want to leap off of that point of the story to how you got here, which is also really interesting too. But before we do that, you kind of made me think about the other thing we were voice messaging about, which is, living in a society and a culture where 10, 11 kids is not the norm, so much so that people get their own TV shows when they have that many kids nowadays.
Which is a side note. One of the things growing up, one of the comments that we would also hear frequently is like, oh, do you know about the Duggars? Or some people would go, oh, are you trying to beat the Duggars?
Oh my God.
Negatively.
Yes. We're trying to beat the Duggars. I'm going to keep procreating in an attempt to beat the Duggars. That's what's going on, people. That's amazing. It's not common. And we were talking about it's this weird thing for me, okay? Because I think that when people have the conviction to just leave it up to God, I think that's amazing and beautiful. I don't think that necessarily everyone is supposed to, and if you're not, that's a problem. People have different lives, different situations. Yes. You take life into consideration, but at the same time, even though I do think that we take our life into consideration, whether it's health, I guess income, housing, whatever, at the same time, I hold this very strong belief that you really can't predict obviously what's going to happen in life, and you cannot, like we were saying, mathematically be like, okay, for each child this much money, because you don't know. Obviously we never know what bad things can happen or crazy things like your house being sucked up in a tornado, but also you can't predict the good things either.
Exactly.
Good stuff can change on a dime, and I've experienced that in my own life many times. But you were saying that your family really felt like each time God blessed you with another family member, God also really blessed your dad's business.
Yes. So, as a small business owner, I know you know this as well, there's ebbs and flows throughout the year, right? When I was born, he was just getting his business up and running. So times were very lean, very, very lean. But as time went on through the years, God just continued to bless, and there continued to be this kind of upward trajectory. But even in the lean times, God always provided for us. And in that situation of the tornado, up until that point, the home we were in, we had moved many times, across states, like we talked about. But then as our family was growing, into larger homes and then into smaller homes, to try and get out of debt and whatnot.
Yeah.
But this particular home, my parent had been built by a larger family. And so it was equipped with everything. We would not have needed to move from there ever.
Wow.
And the point that my dad's businesses were at, they were really flourishing. And so from all outward, man's perspective, we were just in a place as a family of being, just set for, the rest of all the kids' upbringings. We didn't need to move, nothing. But then
the tornado happened.
Just like the Bible says, riches are here today and gone tomorrow.
That's exactly it. And that's so interesting to me because ultimately he did provide, and you lived there for 2 years, and you had an amazing time there, and you had your horses, and you had this life out in the country. And so you did get to enjoy that. But then it is so interesting how, riches today, gone tomorrow, things can be shaken up. And it's all right, God, what do you have for us next? And ultimately God brought you across the country.
Yes.
To Idaho. And that to me is wild too, because I have moved a lot of times, 12 times or something like that since being married. When I was a child, we only moved once. We lived in a condo, and then we moved to a house, and that's where I lived. But as a married adult, literally, I think we've moved 12 times, maybe more than that.
It's a lot.
It's a lot. Moving is a lot.
Yeah.
So thinking in my head about moving with 10 kids sounds like
yeah, like a big deal. Like, where are we going to go? Like you said, even your home in Oklahoma, even if you weren't moving states, just finding a home that feels appropriate for your family size, I can imagine would be like, all right, Lord, here we go. So I don't know, do you want to share a little bit about what that looked like getting out to Idaho and finding your property? Because now your parents are on an amazing property.
Yeah, they are. Well, I mean, it was definitely a much easier transition when you don't have anything that you own.
Oh my gosh, that totally makes sense.
You know,
that totally makes sense.
We didn't have a bunch of stuff to move.
Isn't that incredible? And you probably would have never, like you said, left if that hadn't all been taken from you.
You know, actually,
oh, maybe you would have.
To back up,
Yeah,
leading up to that tornado happening, in a way, my parents felt like the tornado and losing our home was God nudging them and confirming that they needed to move to Idaho because for years prior to that, they had felt this nudge and this urge to move to Idaho. It didn't make any sense. We knew no one here. My dad's businesses were based back there. We had family there. And so it didn't make any sense by man's perspective, you know?
Yeah.
And actually, the morning or afternoon before the tornado hit, my parents had sat down together and made a list of everything that needed to happen in order for us to move to Idaho.
The day?
Yes,
oh
same
my
day.
God. The same day. Wow.
And this list was so huge, very much because of everything we owned. Like all
Isn't
the
that
stuff
wild?
between personally and then from my dad's businesses. We just my parents just felt so honestly burdened by their belongings.
Wow.
Like that was what was keeping them from pursuing what they felt God was calling them to do by moving across the country. And
burdened by their belongings. That is such a...
It's time for the next sponsor of the video, and that is By Optimizers. If you've not heard me shout out By Optimizers yet, well, you're gonna hear it now because I am obsessed with their magnesium. Magnesium helps me so much, not only with my sleep, but also when I was pregnant, magnesium, taking it orally, specifically this magnesium from By Optimizers, was the only thing that stopped my restless leg syndrome. I know that there can be lots of different reasons for different, issues that may come up in life or in pregnancy, but for me, their magnesium just stopped it dead in its tracks. And I think I had used magnesium when I was pregnant the first time with Logan, but it did not stop my restless leg syndrome. And I think the reason that this magnesium does is because it is actually a blend of 7 different types of magnesium. Do you hear my chickens? They're agreeing. And the cool thing about that is that different types of magnesium can be used for different things in the body. So by having 7 different types of high quality magnesium blended together, you are increasing the likelihood of the magnesium being able to go into your body and help with different things that your body needs help with. So I can't recommend their magnesium enough. I take it every single night before bed. And like I said, when I was pregnant, if I didn't take it, I would notice like my legs would start to get that restless leg syndrome feeling again. And then I would take my magnesium and boom, it was gone. It's incredible. We also really like their breakthrough sleep mix. We actually like to give Logan like a little miniature quarter scoop in some water at night, and he loves it. It helps with his sleep to be deep and peaceful as well. And it's just a really great brand backed by a lot of research. Like they research a lot behind each product, and I can't recommend them enough. So if you want to check out By Optimizers, you can use my code NikkiP10 for 10% off of your order. And thank you in advance if you do use my code. Let's get back to the interview.
Anyways, go on. I just had to highlight that. Like, wow.
But yeah, so then when we lost pretty much everything, they felt like God was going, okay, here, I made the way for you.
Yeah. You know what you need to do next.
And so we, cleanup started. Insurance was a whole other topic.
Oh my gosh.
It was a nightmare to navigate. And so we reached a point with cleanup and whatnot where we couldn't do anymore because of where things were at with insurance. And so we actually loaded up and came all the way up to Idaho to kind of scout out and try and find a place to live, because also insurance was supposed to be like providing a like temporary housing for us. And so with the goal in mind of moving up here, like we tried to find something to rent or whatnot on that first trip. It was also just good to get away from all the mess, and it, not just our home being wrecked, but the whole area and the community and whatnot. It was honestly a little bit like being in a war zone.
I can only imagine.
That's, just, it was places that are just unrecognizable, because the trees and everything has just,
completely been flattened and torn up.
Yeah, unrecognizable. And so it was kind of good to get away. But so yeah, we took the trip up here, kind of scouted things out, went back, finished all the cleanup, and it was like 6 months from the time the tornado hit until we actually were able to pack up the few things that we did have and made our way up here, not knowing a soul. But my God, my parents really just felt like God was calling them to do it and had made the way. And so
And you guys lived in like an RV or something like that for a while, right?
So that was another just miraculous provision of God. We had an RV that was actually in the shop, having some repair work done on it, and they had actually been taking longer than they were supposed to in the repairs. And my parents were feeling antsy because they had some trips they wanted to go on, but it being in the repair shop ended up being a blessing in disguise, because then that was our temporary home for a while, until we were able to find a rental up here, and we were there in that rental for 6 months, I want to say, before we found the property that they are on now and moved there.
Wow.
So,
yeah, I mean, a thread that goes through your family's story, and just something I think in general, like we were talking about, when people kind of try to meticulously plan each child, and like, I will have this much money for this kid, and if I have this much money, then I will have another kid. You know, a thread that goes through is just God's provision.
Yes.
And how it seems like, we were saying in the messages, like every child that they've had, every step that they've taken in faith, like God has really come through for them. And I think, sometimes in America, we have a different idea of what like wealth looks like and what provision looks like. And I think, yes, maybe in your circumstance or, other people's circumstances, it could require you to be more open to like having less or not living as much in the lap of luxury, because it is just different for us in the States. But ultimately, you guys have been provided for the whole way.
Yeah.
And seemingly pretty well, you know?
And, I'm trying to think of how to exactly frame this thought or this string of thoughts. But God is a multiplier. And when we see so many stories in the Bible, I've been thinking about this, of where, like feeding the thousands with the few fishes and loaves of bread, and God multiplied those resources and made it enough. Like from a human perspective, there was no way that was going to feed those crowds, the little bit of food in both those stories, but God multiplied it and did make it enough. Or the story of the woman and the oil, where and because of her faith, and God is a multiplier of resources.
Yes.
And so, and that doesn't necessarily always mean that it's going to be monetarily. But, as far as time and the investment that you're able to put into children, which I believe is what is ultimately most important. Yes, of course, we have basic needs of food, shelter, clothing, and whatnot. But even if you aren't in a place where resource-wise you can, buy all new clothes and have the fanciest car and a new house and, that sort of thing. Really, what is most important?
Yeah, exactly.
And like what you were saying about American culture, or just culture in the West, the perspective, honestly, we have it so good.
Dude.
And our perspective of what is meager
is so different compared to other parts of the world.
Yeah. And, you know, what provides children with the richest childhood experience and prepares them best for adult life? Is it being able to provide everything for them new?
Yeah, exactly.
And, you know, absolutely anything they want, just at the drop of a hat? Is that what's going to prepare them for real life in the best way possible? Or is it going to be these more tangible life skills and community?
Yes, lifelong relationships.
Yes, lifelong relationships. And of course, there are families that don't emphasize those things. But that's not the way it always is. And there are many families who do emphasize those relational aspects, the life skills, and as a result, they are delivering their adult children into, you know, the rest of their lives with being so far ahead of, honestly, children that have just had every single need catered to. There's a certain amount of grit in being able to figure things out and make do, or, you know, just that serves people well throughout life, because like we were talking about, you don't know what's going to come your way.
No, exactly.
And if you are used to this just very pampered, everything
is about you.
Anything
you want, you get.
That's not real life.
Yeah, no.
Life does not revolve around any one person.
No. That was something that really stood out to me about the Duggars in reading their books, was just noticing, like, I'm like, dude, these kids have a lot of, like, assuming they're telling the truth in these books, like, how do you all know how to, like, fly planes and be, like, you're like, volunteer emergency responders, and, like, you know, this person, they knew how to do so many things, and, you know, just different, like, coming from a city, from an artsy background, it's like, and dude, no offense, right, I love the arts, but, like, everyone I knew, it was like, you know, we all knew how to dance and sing, and, like, we didn't know how to, like, go and help after a disaster and take care of people medically, or, like, operate machinery or build homes, and, like, I mean, I can't even think of any other examples off the top of my head, but I just remember in reading the books, like, how many skills these kids seemingly had. Yes. Okay, another thing I wanted to say was, when Dan and I lived in Singapore, we went to, it was either Malaysia or Indonesia, for like a 3-day vacation. And when we got there and we were driving to the hotel, there were just miles of homes, but they weren't homes. I mean, they were their homes, but they were cardboard boxes and plywood that people had kind of, like, you know, like, if you were, like, they'd plastered them together. Like, I mean, if we were, like, playing pretend in the backyard, that was, like, what it was, but they were people's homes. They had, like, stacked things together, and they were just walking around, doing their laundry, playing, and I remember it just hit me in such a different way than, like, what you see on the screen, you know, because when you see it on the screen, it almost doesn't feel real, but when I saw it in real life, it was like, wow. And I only say that just to back up to emphasize what we were saying about how different of a lifestyle we have here in the West in general. I mean, you just don't see that much in America, even in some of the poorest places, like cardboard boxes as houses.
You see a little bit of that in Spokane now.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if you're gonna see it anywhere, it's actually gonna be, like, deep in the city, but those aren't even what I was looking at. They had literally built them into their own, like, houses. Yeah, it was a trip, and that, I guess the other thing I, like, wanted to hop off into these two thoughts. One, I've said this a million times on my channel, but I am so grateful that the Lord let me have a baby, especially after 2 babies, especially, I mean, technically 3, but you know what I mean, that are here with me, especially after all of those years of, like, thinking, like, genuinely, like, what's so special about duplicating your own DNA? And I think I've told you this, I used to be really insulted when people would say things like, oh, you can't know because you don't have kids, or you'll see when you have kids, because I thought, like, what are you talking about? Like, I know what it's like to love people, and now that I've had kids, I realize, like,
oh, it wasn't an insult. It was literally just like, no, this is a crazy experience. You're like a human transformer. You have to experience what it's like to grow a person out of nowhere. It's not about loving people. Yes, we all love people, but having kids and multiplying, which is really the point that I wanted to kind of get to. I'm so grateful that the Lord has let me experience it, because through having babies, I've realized like, oh, this is why the world, Satan, evil people, whichever you want to use, doesn't want us to have kids, because having children and duplicating ourselves has been like one of the closest, I don't want to say the closest, because I've experienced God's love and presence in so many other ways in my life as well, but it's such a specific, literally magical experience having children. And so doing this, and also how hard it's been for me, but also I think for everyone to a degree, just realizing the sacrifice that it takes to bring kids onto the planet has led me to this point of really admiring large families. And I filmed a video that's guaranteed up on my Instagram at this point, but it was me reacting to a Jordan Peterson clip, because I say that like one of the biggest leftist lies that I fell for was the myth of overpopulation.
Yes.
I really used to think like, oh my gosh, like there's not enough resources, there's too many people, not like, so don't have kids, but the spot that I landed in was like, well, but if I don't want to have kids, then I mean, what's the point? There's a ton of kids that need parents, which I've said this before, that's a separate topic, the whole adoption, orphan, conversation, that's separate. But I thought, okay, these kids need parents, and what's so special about duplicating my DNA? And the planet's overpopulated. Anyways, Jordan Peterson in this clip basically debunks that by getting to the point that basically humans are resources. They're not parasites, like people like to say of women, not only in pregnancy, but people on the planet in general, like we're just takers, but that people actually create and they duplicate resources, they come up with creative solutions, they learn how to make more out of less. And just that concept in general of like duplicating, yes, I think it's like God, we are creative, like God is creative. And people are just a gift. And I don't even know where I'm going with all of this, but just I have such admiration now for big families, like I said, because of everything I just said. Yeah.
Well, and a thought that came to mind when you were talking about just the miracle of birth and carrying a child and whatnot. It's literally like this act of partnering with God and bringing life, bringing new life into the world. That is amazing. How could
chills
you,
again.
How could you possibly, I don't know, top that experience?
You kind of can't. It's such a blessing.
Because at his very nature, God is a creator. And just like, again, what you said, when people create things, it's an expression of, or a reflection of the nature of God in us.
Yes.
Because as we know, we are created in the image of God. And so, it's just, I don't know how you could possibly top that of, it's not just the creation of, oh, there's, beautiful things in our world. Like, oh, somebody can be an amazing artist or an architect or, a baker or, many different things.
Yeah.
But this partnership of bringing an eternal soul into the world.
It's such a trip.
And that was something that I heard so much from my father growing up, is when people would ask them, about like, how many kids they had, and just like we're inquisitive and wondering like why they had so many kids. That sort of thing. Like, how did you reach this point where you have this many children?
A gaggle of children.
One of the things he would say is, I reached a point where I realized, do I, like in my finite, man-limited ability to reason, do I have the wisdom to be able to say whether or not another eternal soul comes into the world?
Yeah, because some people try and try and try, and God just doesn't put the life there.
Exactly. And of course, like, going back to, you already kind of touched on this before, like, everybody has different life circumstances. And so, no, this is no, like, shame on anybody.
Totally.
That's
Yes.
not the path God takes
Yes.
them down.
But
However,
it's an interesting thing to consider, especially if you're feeling that conviction or the beginnings of a conviction, to like not necessarily just squelch it
Exactly.
because of what the world's telling you.
yes, exactly.
Because I've come to now think that it's actually evil, which is what Jordan Peterson says in his clips, that it's
Yeah.
very anti-human, this whole thought
Yes.
process of like, oh, the world's too overpopulated. Oh, they're just a drain on society. It's like,
Yes.
dude, I don't think that, I mean, I just got chills again because I don't think that everyone is supposed to have 11, 19, 20
Yes.
kids, whatever. Clearly, because like we just said, some people can try and not get pregnant.
Yes.
You know, some people
or
have health
that
issues.
God gives them
or-
one child. And
Exactly.
They're one and done. Like,
Yes, but if you have this, like we just said, that feeling, that potential conviction there, it's like don't necessarily just squash it. There's something there to consider, because now this whole idea of be fruitful and multiply means something totally different to me. It's like, oh, that's why God said it. Like, what a
Yes.
miracle, what a blessing. Sorry, I didn't mean to take
no,
what
it's
you were
okay.
saying.
I completely agree, and just I think what you're saying is great. You're hitting the nail on the head.
On the head.
And it made me think, just I can't imagine, the thought of any one of my siblings not existing
I just got chills again. That.
is just, I can't imagine it.
Yeah.
Because I mean, every single one of them, we all bring our own unique personalities and talents and dynamic. You wouldn't think with that many people that if just one person or two people are gone,
Yeah.
that you would really notice it.
Yes.
But it completely shifts the dynamic
Yes.
when we have family get-togethers. And like right now I have two brothers in two different parts of the country, away from this local area. And the times we've gotten together as a family, it just, the dynamic feels so altered. And it honestly, even though there's still, I mean, at this point with in-laws and grandchildren, there's still, like 16 of us,
Yeah.
that are all together. But it feels like such a small group.
Yeah.
Which is so funny to say. But yeah, it just, each person brings
their own
something.
No, I
special.
can even imagine it, and that is something that I'm once again really grateful to the Duggars for putting themselves out there, because I experienced that secondhand just as a viewer watching the show.
Yes.
And I would say that to Dan. I'm like, Dan, it is so crazy. You think that once there's like in your mind and your imagination, they all just become like anonymous, like
Yes.
like 12 kids, 15 kids, whatever. But once you place faces and names and personalities and you see them interacting, you're just like, wow. I mean, it sounds so obvious, but maybe not. Like,
No.
they're all their own individual people that bring something
Yes.
special to the table. And yeah.
Well,
go on.
I will say, even though you say that sounds obvious, we experienced as a family many times growing up, like even in churches we went to.
Yes, we got to talk about that.
Where people just honestly, they didn't see us as individuals. They did just see us as this one conglomerate.
A gaggle of children.
Yeah, a gaggle of children.
Yeah.
And people that we, went to church with for years, didn't know our names.
Hi, it's me again.
Didn't know our names, which, no, of course, nobody's expecting them to
Totally.
But there is a principle of, if you care enough and you place a big enough of a priority on it,
Yeah.
okay, teachers in classrooms are able to remember their students' names.
Yeah.
How many people do you know just in your own local community that you can recall their names? I mean, is it 30 people? Is it 50, 100?
Yeah.
I've heard stats somewhere of, on average, like how many names and, to faces that people can, just like our brains can retain.
Yeah, a lot.
And it's a couple hundred, I want to say.
That's what I was going to guess, honestly.
It's a couple hundred. And so just the very idea that,
it's just the anonymous family.
Yes.
Yeah, this is...
It's in a way
Dehumanizing?
dehumanizing or
Yeah.
devaluing the fact that no, each of these people, each of these, small children that, yes, sure, there are probably times where they are a little bit louder than you or rambunctious than you would appreciate. They're still eternal souls.
Totally. And this is something, I keep referencing our voice
And
messages.
all of us were children at one point too.
Yeah, that too.
Who of us hasn't been a child and a little bit louder at times than we should have been, or a little bit more rambunctious at times than we should have been?
That's
Which of us as adults don't have days where we kind of have meltdowns?
Yes. And that's what I mean about your like non-judgy nature that came through to me clearly in our friendship. What is... Oh, okay, sorry. I thought it was 4:40. I was like, oh my gosh, the sale starts in 20 minutes. We gotta go. Straight after this, we're going to a sale together. She thinks it's our 6th. I think it's our 7th. We've been a lot.
We can agree to disagree.
We can agree to disagree, exactly. Either way, it's a ritual for us, so we gotta go after this. Anyways, this is something else we talked about was like culture infiltrating the church. And I mean, we see that in general. This is a very long, there could be a whole long separate conversation.
Yes.
In and of itself. I was about to say even like, whatever, if you're a Protestant, whatever, that's a whole separate thing too. But I told Maria, and I think I said to you guys that like, Dan and I experienced that in our own way, even in the sense of like marriage, because even though Dan and I waited a very long time to have children, and like I said, it was the biggest leftist lie I fell for, there were also layers there. You guys know I dealt with a lot of chronic pain. There was a lot to that. But Dan and I got married at 20, and I was 20, he was 21. And I'd say that's still relatively young across the whole US, but particularly in Los Angeles. And when Dan and I told our pastor, we like showed up the next day after getting engaged to a small group at a local coffee shop. And I was like, I'm engaged. Our pastor literally looked at me and went, why? And it just was so like, what? And we got a lot of discouragement from a lot of people because of our age, because we were in LA. But it was very shocking coming from our pastor, because in our heads we're like, wait, but isn't that the goal? Also to us, we're like, it's not like we're 15, 16, like what? Like we're in our 20s now, like early 20s, but still. And I think that there is a parallel or a similarity here with the kid thing, with this idea that like large families used to be much more the norm. And I know people have said things like, oh, well, and I mean, obviously this is true. Kids were dying a lot more back in the day, but I don't think people were having babies just because they knew, oh, some of them might die or whatever.
They were replacements.
Yeah, replacements. I don't think that
just
that
in
was
case.
Exactly. I don't think that was the case. I truly think that we as a culture don't value life and individual souls in the same way they did in the past, because as a culture we have become more secularized, more atheistic. As a general, we're all generally taught that we come from apes and that, we're just flying through the sky in balls of gas and we don't matter, So I think that it's just unfortunately infiltrated the church. And when Maria and I were talking about that, she agreed that is something that they've experienced in church as well, like this feeling of like more than 3 or 4 kids. Like, I don't know if you have anything to chime on to that or if I just summarized it, but.
No, you did summarize it pretty well. And obviously not every church. We have been in churches that have
celebrated big families.
Very much celebrated big families and life and, have just thought, oh, this is great. That people are having all these children, they're multiplying and they're raising these children up in the fear and admonition of the Lord.
Exactly.
But we had definitely also been in churches where it was like, oh wow, just like what? Why do you have that many?
Yeah. It's not as
nobody actually said that.
Yeah.
But
you are the strange ones.
Yes, we were the strange ones. We were the outliers. And not only for that, but because of other reasons, other values that my parents espoused, like one being they kept us in church with them versus sending us to the nursery and Sunday school. And I mean, of course, I will say there is a certain level of respect for, a church service where it's like, okay, if your child is out of control, you should not be keeping your child in church service. But my parents, one of the things that they really valued was teaching us how to behave and sit still and be quiet during a church service, and for all of us to be together during that hour and a half, each week that was, the church service. And so and
I love the idea of assuming that the kids can learn and take something from the worship service together. Yeah. But go on, sorry.
Yeah, and that it's valuable for the children to, even if they're not understanding everything that the pastor is saying, but it's valuable for them to see their parents and, for the younger children, like their older siblings, taking in messages and worshiping, and there's this example and trickle-down effect that is able to take place. Yeah. And there's value in that. We as a culture are already so segregated. And in so many ways, there used to be, I believe, a lot more of cross-generational relationships and just community and everything else. And we've lost the value in that. You get to, opposite ends of the spectrum, and people kind of get left out, when you're new and inconvenient and, a little bit noisy, like you can't control when a baby cries or makes a little bit of noise. Well, that's inconvenient. And then you have the opposite end of the spectrum of people when they are advanced in age and they maybe don't have all their faculties about them. And it's just, it's an inconvenience. So let's just put them away, out of sight. And it's just, it is as a whole, culturally, I would say what you said, that we've lost sight of the value of life.
Yeah, and that's a really good point too, that it's both ends of the spectrum are beneficial, not only to each other, to each end of the spectrum, but to everyone in between. That youth, that new life, that baby brings so much joy, so many lessons. Hope. Yes, and hope and lessons to everyone as well. And that older person brings, depending on how with it they are, but either way, brings wisdom, brings lessons of from their life, not only shared lessons, but lessons that other people gain by caring for those people. And, if we're blessed enough to live, this is kind of a separate rant or comment, but if we're blessed enough to live a long life, we're all going to be there eventually one day anyways. And so it is really sad, this idea of just brushing older people off. Like I said, kind of a separate note, but you made me think about that. And my brain is trying to not go off on a rant about, public schooling and the separation of people by age and that infiltrating the church. And I'm not even 100% against Sunday school for kids, but it's a concept that you and I have talked about a lot that I think is definitely worth evaluating, as opposed to just, this is just what it is. This is just what we have to do.
It's just what we do.
Yes.
Evaluate, okay, is
this what's right for my family?
And is this serving the function and purpose that it's intended to? Or is it clashing in some way with the values and things that we're trying to accomplish? Working backwards from, what's the end goal? And and we did do Sunday school, but when we were, all able to make it to church that early in the morning, because sometimes that was a struggle, especially, we are very close in age. We are very much stair-stepped. So
don't you have to be when you have that many kids? She's got a fertile window to fit all those kids in. They got to be back to back. That's what I'm imagining.
Kind of, I guess, although they weren't necessarily going for let's see how many we can get there. Just we have
letting it happen.
Hands open.
Yeah.
We didn't necessarily have a number in mind. Yeah. But, we were very stair-stepped. So when I was 2, they had 2 and under, and then 3 and under, 4 and under, 5 and under, 6, 7 and under, and just on from there. My youngest brother was born before I turned 16. So we are just 11 of us in under 16 years.
That's
we were
amazing.
Very sandwiched together.
Wow.
And so there was a period there during the very early young years where, a 4-year-old is definitely able to get themselves dressed, that sort of thing. But you probably still have to pick their clothes out for them
and
monitor them to make sure they actually put the clothes on that
exactly.
you picked out for them.
Let's go. We gotta go.
And making sure to keep them on task when it comes to eating breakfast, as well
Keep
as
eating.
The 3 other younger ones. And so, anyhow, that's all that to say. Sunday school, was sometimes hit and miss for us.
Yeah.
Being able to get out the door during those.
The Duggars call it Duggar time.
Yeah.
I'm like, I can only imagine, dude. We had our own time, and there was just 3 of us, and it was like, okay, getting us all out is like a whole thing.
Yeah.
Okay, speaking of time, this is kind of, I think, my last question or thing that I really wanted to get from you or cover with you. And it's this idea, you kind of touched on it briefly when we were talking about just valuing maybe sometimes things over time in the West, or not really knowing how to balance that or what that would look like.
Yeah.
A lot of people I know, when they think of big families, whether they're criticizing them or they're like, worried about it or freaked out by it, they'll think like, how do the kids all get enough love or time from the parents? Like, what did that look like? Like, what is family life? What did love, time distribution, time together, what did that look like in your family?
Yeah, no, I'm really glad you brought that up, because if we had forgotten to cover this,
this feels like the biggest thing.
I would have been bummed, because that is one of the biggest questions that people have in their minds about large families.
Yeah. Because it's hard to picture if you're from a smaller family, if you have an idea of what you think family should look like.
Yes.
It's like, what does that look like for them?
And what quality
time looks
is.
like. Yes, exactly.
And so, for us as a family, the way it worked, I'm sure it's different for everybody, but the way it worked for us is, during the days when Mom was with us, we literally did everything together as a unit. And I already kind of said this, but we would work together, we would play together, we would do grocery shopping together. And I think there's an element of, it's not just the parental to child relationship that helps a child feel grounded and loved and valued. That is important for sure. But when you also have other rich relationships around
that totally
you,
makes sense.
And so, no, my mom wasn't spending an hour of one-on-one time with each of us kids every single day.
Yeah.
That you couldn't do that. But we were like a unit in a way.
Yeah.
And we had the benefit of not only that relationship with our parents, but then also with each other. And kind of with the way the birth order worked out, like I'm the oldest, and then I have 2 brothers that are right after me. So they were always very close. Once they got past their like rough and tumble toddler stage. But they were always really close. And then we have 2 more sisters after that. They've always been like twins. I mean, literally. They are so close, even to this day. They're just 2 peas in a pod. And then 3 boys, and so they were always like a unit. And then 2 girls, and then youngest brother, bringing up the caboose, I guess. And so the 3 younger kids, like they were a unit. And so people kind of already naturally paired off and had like these built-in best friends. For me, being the oldest, my mom was always my best friend.
I was just
we were always
you and your
buddies.
Mom seem so close.
We are so close, and there's times where where I've had a little bit of remorse, like, oh, I didn't have like a birth, buddy,
sibling buddy,
right next to me. But I mean, I'm friends with all of my siblings.
Yes, exactly.
We're all close, but I got the benefit of having that really close relationship with my mom. Not necessarily more, I wouldn't say necessarily more so than like my other siblings, but just I loved hanging out with my mom. Like in social settings, kid from a fairly young age, like other kids would be playing and whatnot, and I'd be sitting there like listening to my mom's conversations with other women.
That's so sweet. Yeah, it's very on brand for you.
Yes. So this doesn't really feel like a coherent response.
No, it's great.
There's that aspect of it.
Yeah.
But then also some logistical or kind of very intentional things that my parents would do is we had phases where they would, I forget exactly how the schedule was, but it was, if it was like 1 or 2 nights a week where a child, we would take turns like getting to stay up a little bit later than the rest of the kids.
Cute.
And we'd have like mom and dad time, and like get to do something with mom and dad. And for birthdays, we had a tradition of dad would take the birthday child out on like a dad, child date, I guess you could say. We'd go to the like Western Outfitter store, and if we needed new boots or new jeans, we'd get to pick
Coming right up.
Yeah, we get to pick something out for our birthday, and usually get lunch, and just maybe run other errands with dad, that sort of thing. And
that's
so
sweet.
They intentionally built in different rhythms or routines like that so that we would get one-on-one time.
Yeah.
But that wasn't honestly consistent throughout our entire childhood.
Yeah.
But it didn't, I wouldn't say it affected like us feeling loved or valued.
Totally, yes.
I think there's this myth when it comes to a child, like what creates a child that feels loved and valued, and that it all has to do with the the one-on-one time spent with the adult, versus I think there's very much that is very heavily influenced by, yes, the parents, but then also feeling like a valued contributing member of something greater than themselves.
Yes, that.
And so that is something that we all had, as we all knew that, we had age appropriate, responsibilities, and we would cycle through, like who had what chores, for different like periods of time. And we all just knew that we made a difference, that we, in the day-to-day life and functioning of our home and our family, and that we were adding value. And it wasn't just all coming from like, this affirmation or, focused, you are the center of my world right now.
My special little butterfly.
type of dynamic with our parents.
Yeah. I liked I like the way that you're wording that about how it's not just about the dynamic between the parent and the child, even like that one-on-one quote unquote quality time. Yes, I do think it's cool and important to have that in there, like you said you guys did, but also how do you even quantify that? Like what if one kid, wants 6 hours and another kid wants, only 20 minutes or whatever? Like what is the appropriate amount? Like every kid is very different. Yeah. And so I think what you said about it being like, it's the whole family, it's all of the relationships, it's working towards a goal as a family. That those are the things that contribute to a child feeling loved. I just think I think that's really hard to quantify.
Yes.
That.
Well, and the other aspect of that as well is, anybody that's into the whole like 5 love languages, everybody has different ways that they personally feel loved. And so it may not be like all this extended time. It could be just a thoughtful, gesture of like, oh, here, I thought of you. I saw your favorite drink at the store and brought it to you. Or, oh, here, I'm going to sit down with you for the next little while and talk to you about, what you're doing. Yeah, I'm going to sit here with you and talk to you about your day and listen to how you're doing, ask you questions about how your school, this particular subject is going. Just everybody feels that love in different ways. And so the time being the only
thing.
The thing.
Yes.
I don't think is a thing.
No, it's you navigate life, I think, as you go, just like we were saying about the money. Like, how can you say how much money you need to raise a child when you could kind of flex with it as you go, and you don't know what people are going to gift you. You don't know what kind of deals you're going to find. Holy moly. That was something about the Duggars book. I told Dan, I'm like, these people are so resourceful. Like, they talked about all kinds of things I had never even heard of, like these auctions that they go to, and the things the way that they built their kitchen was through like a restaurant that had shut down, and they were auctioning off like $100,000 worth of kitchen supplies, like ovens and a dishwasher and all these things. They got to have an industrial kitchen for like $7,000 or something like that. It was insane. And they just had story after story, and you can't predict those things. No. And so just like how I think you can't quantify like the money, I don't think you can quantify the time, because you don't know what the child is going to be like. Even honestly, maybe I'm reaching here and I'm completely flipping the script, but like when Dan and I have talked about possibly having another child, you guys know the biggest thing for me is really just the consideration of how sick I've been all 3 times I've been pregnant. It literally terrifies me, but I weigh it out. Like, I looked at Michelle Duggar when I was pregnant. I was just like, but she's done. Like, you know, there is part of me that's like, man, if I just suffer for 9 months, like, and then I have a baby, you know, like I have a person. And so that is definitely a way out. I don't know what we're going to do. And ultimately, obviously, it's not all up to us anyways, even if we're like, let's do it. God may not give us another child. Who knows? But I was going to say, this whole idea of things being quantifiable, like how much money you need, how much time you need, like so much of life, not only do you not know when blessings are going to come, but like, just trying to have a baby in general is scary. Like, I'm realizing as I'm saying this is kind of negative, but like, you don't know if a child's going to be born with like a severe health issue. You don't know if, you know, they're going to, I mean, I know people that have had stillborns. Like, you just don't know so much of life. And I think that is what life is it's an adventure. And it's scary. And it's joyful and it's beautiful. And as we all saw during COVID, there is this tendency in culture that wants to kind of like predict and control everything and make it all perfect. You know, I've seen these articles of like, they're saying that like Gen Z doesn't go out and drink, and they're saying, oh, that's kind of a good thing because like health-wise, like alcohol's not good for you. But what they're actually speculating is that a lot of Gen Z is kind of just staying inside at home and not really socializing and not really living life.
They're afraid to put themselves out there.
They're afraid to put themselves out there. And so, sorry if you can hear Zoe, she really needs her nails trimmed. You might hear the pitter patter. Anyways, yeah, and it kind of, you know, even in this idea, like we were talking about, life is a little scary, but life is also beautiful, and life is unpredictable. And, you know, you kind of, I remember I had a therapist once who was like, life is like an ocean. You know, you just have to, you know, it doesn't really get easier. You just become a better surfer. You just got to like ride the waves. And it's like, you trust God and you ride the waves, and hearing like the life of a larger family, that's kind of what it sounds like. Like, it's just like, you just take it as it comes and you're trusting the Lord. And it's amazing to see how God has provided for you guys in your journey.
And I mean, there's so many logistical things, you know, people, like you said earlier, you can't really imagine the logistics of it. But when you get into it,
you learn as you go.
Yeah, you learn as you go. And there's trial and error that you try things and you realize, okay, well, that doesn't work so well. And I mean, I feel like that's where I'm at right now with 2 kids and a third on the way. You know, there's so much of just like, okay, figuring out, you know, what works for, you know, schedule wise and dynamic wise, like between the 2 of them and where they're at, you know.
Or even like, I couldn't picture even having a baby before, and now I delivered 2 at home. Like, what? You know, it's like, that's a little bit of a different place.
You just, if you wait
until you're ready. Yes.
And, you know, part of my own personal story is, you know, with my first, I got pregnant before I personally felt ready to. And I'm like all freaking out because, oh, it's out of my control type of thing. But honestly, the circumstances of my life were so extremely stable compared to the circumstances that some people conceive under. And, you know, bring a new baby into the world. Like, here I was, newly but happily married, and we had a roof over our heads, and he was
family nearby.
Family nearby. He has a good job, but it wasn't in the timing that I wanted, and so it felt like my world's falling apart because I'm out of control of this.
Yeah.
When in reality, here I was upset because this great blessing wasn't being given to me in the timing that I ideally wanted it to be. And how fickle and just ungrateful is that? Yeah. And I mean, he is such a blessing in our lives, and has enriched it and brought so much to it, as well as our daughter. And
well, it's kind of, I think, when people used to say to me, like, you're never going to feel ready, just like the whole thought of, like, you can't understand till you have kids. And I'd be like, I would think, like, you'll never be ready. Like, no, there are circumstances that are better than others. And yes, that can be true. Like you were saying, you were in ideal circumstances. It just wasn't the timing you wanted. But I think part of that statement is also this idea of, like, no, the reason you'll never feel ready is because once you start facing it and you try to think through everything, you really can't, because you haven't done it. And even if you have done it, like you said, 3 kids will look different than 2 kids. So you can't know what that's going to be like. And so that's the element of, like, not feeling ready, but God's grace, not only in what he does miraculously in our life, but also in the way that he made humans, like, that we are resilient and creative and we can figure things out. It's like, you figure it out as you go. And that is what makes life so scary and beautiful and wild and amazing is, I guess you just figure it out as you go. And, I don't know, I'm grateful to know you. I'm glad, I know you were at the first of the 11, so I can't be like, glad your parents didn't stop. You're like in the back. But I'm glad, like, the experiences you've had and that I've gotten to hear through you. And, every time I see your mom, I'm just like, man, she's just so rad and amazing, and your dad too, and your siblings. And I just, I don't know, is there anything else before we go that you're like, ooh, I have this one thing I want to say before we wrap? If not, that's fine too. I just didn't want to be like, bye, and you're like, wait, one more thing.
No. Like, yes, there's the logistics of being a child and growing up, but that's not, like, the end of it. It's not just, you're in a perpetual childhood. Like you were saying about Michelle Duggar, like, she had all these kids and now she's done. And like, she has all these adult children now and grandchildren and everything else. And now, as my family is moving into that next phase of life,
so
like,
cool.
Over half of us are adults now, and some of us are married and have children. It's just,
your family is, like, multiplying so much.
Yes, and I continue to feel the value of, and see the value of being from a large family. When I have a baby, like, I have friends that, bring me meals and, help and whatnot, but
your family
both
is
my
your support
family
system.
And Brian's family, honestly, we have such a good support system between our 2 families. To help with our kids and help us with food, and or if we get injured or sick, or just whatever.
And that's who the village is supposed to be, not the government. Anyway, go on.
Yes, exactly. And so,
sorry, I derailed you.
Friends are great. I love my friends. I love you. But there is something special about just this shared connection of, DNA, background, shared life experiences, and everything with the people that you've grown up with.
Totally.
And no, we don't, like, all get along all the time, or we have some, different perspectives on different things. I will say, like, we are all grounded in our faith and like, worldview and like, core values. But
which that alone is pretty amazing, because there's a lot of very small families that is not the case.
But even despite points of maybe strong personality conflict, because we're all strong personalities.
I love that.
But there's just a camaraderie and a community there that is irreplaceable. Like, like I said at the beginning, I feel like it is literally one of the greatest gifts my parents could have and did give to me. Is
all
so
of your
many
siblings. Yeah, it's, I mean, and not to say it again, but the Michelle Duggar thing, 20 kids done. Your family, she had put in the time, had the 11 kids. Yeah. But yes, I do keep thinking about like, now you're going to go into this next chapter that is so beautiful that you all, God willing, are going to have kids and families, but then you're all one big giant family.
Yeah.
And that's just so amazing, not only for all of you, like you said, what a gift they gave you guys, but also, man, your parents, like what a blessing. You know, I heard Nancy Wilson talking about this, how like, and I don't remember where in the Bible, but it talks about like your children being like a crown on your head, but it's like, you really see that crown or like the fruits of your labor even more so once they start having kids and it continues. It's like, wow, it didn't just stop at me. Like it keeps going and you see God's faithfulness and that's just so beautiful.
Well, and again, not to like draw this out really long, but another, just thing that I love is seeing this continuity of, my youngest sibling, he is 12, and then my oldest is about to turn 5. And so they are actually closer in age than I am to my youngest sibling. And like, so uncle wild. And nephew. Yes, but just the relationship that the two of them have.
So beautiful.
My youngest brother, he never had that experience of having younger siblings.
Yeah.
And there is a certain just dynamic and just experience of knowing what little kids do. When you have younger siblings.
Yes.
That he didn't get to experience with siblings, but now he's getting to experience it with his nephews and nieces.
That's so beautiful.
And it's just it's
and
so
cool. It's such a specific dynamic of like having a younger sibling that's so cute, but then also getting that feeling of like someone looking up to you is different. And if you've been at the tail end and you haven't experienced that, like what a beautiful thing that he gets to experience now.
Yeah, and feeling the weight of like, oh yeah, what I do is being watched and imitated.
And taking care of them.
Yes,
and
developing those
skills.
Yeah, the skills of being able to set yourself aside. Like he was the youngest, and so of course there are some classic like youngest child. I mean, we were talking about this the other day. He was being carried around by some of us older kids until he was like 5 and 6 years old.
So funny.
Until finally somebody one day went, wait a second.
Why are we carrying him?
He is way too old to be carrying around.
So
he is definitely not a baby or a young toddler anymore.
So
he is a young child.
Yeah, let's stop that now. Okay, you can walk. That's so
He definitely had the like spoiled by older siblings. Not so much like spoiled by the parents, but spoiled by older sibling type of thing.
That is so funny.
And so now him getting to experience the, I'm not the center of the universe.
Yes, totally.
Dynamic.
That too.
There's somebody younger than me that I need to put.
Yeah, that's so sweet.
First in some situations, and consider.
So sweet.
Over myself is just a really valuable and enriching thing. He's going to be better off for it.
It's such a gift.
In the long haul.
And your kids having all of those aunties and uncles, it's just such a gift.
Yeah, and having people that, again, back to the community thing of having people in our lives that, and in our children's lives that care about them so deeply. Would, literally put their life, lay their life down to protect them.
Yes.
Where we don't have to worry about what they're being exposed to,
or the safety of your children,
or anything else. That we have this large community of people that care so deeply about our children, and just are investing into them, and it's just this beautiful, full circle kind of dynamic, and now seeing the cousins with each other, and it's
so sweet.
It's so fun, and I'm just so excited for more siblings to get married and
have
more
so many kids. It's gonna be wild. Yeah, I'm so blessed to live next door to my parents and have that trusting, just like they're my parents and I trust them and they love my kids, and same things, they would lay their life down for them. But I can't imagine, sorry, Zoe's hopping on her, I just realized you guys can't see that. No. I can't imagine having that many people that like, I know I trust them with my kids. They love my kids. And that's really kind of the point of this interview and why I wanted to do this, is because I have come to the belief, I'm also, side note, without going off onto it, a little conspiratorial about the way that the Duggars have been portrayed in the media and the way that people have kind of come after them in recent years. And I'm not talking about the stuff, you know, that happened with Josh and all of that. I know, like, when bad things happen, obviously they deserve to be, I don't know what the word, like, scrutinized, or I don't know what the word I'm looking for. But aside from that, I feel like there has been whether it's through culture or a group of people, there's been like a looking down on large families that I don't like, I don't agree with. And knowing you and knowing your family, I really just wanted you to sit down and I wanted to have this conversation. And I'm hoping that this is encouraging to some of you out there.
And can I add one more?
Yeah.
Encouraging, you know, kind of to wrap it all up, thought.
Yeah.
You know, my parents, we touched on kind of their background or whatnot. They did not come from the type of culture family culture that they created for their own children. And so
That's
much of
amazing.
So much of the intentional decisions that they made, you know, working backwards from, you know, honestly, the end result that they were hoping to have of like close sibling relationships and close family relationships, and, you know, delivering their children into adulthood with the least amount of baggage. That was one of the things that they would say. Came from their own lived experiences of like having the opposite. And I just want to say that, you know, regardless of what your own personal background is,
I'm
the
so glad
family
you're
that
adding
you
this.
have come from,
You can make different decisions.
You can make different decisions. You don't have to continue down a path that is hurtful or destructive or doesn't value family. Like, you can make different decisions and you can be the first. And in being the first, even though there is a large learning curve, I mean, there's no way around it. Yeah, there's a huge learning curve. But in taking that first step and laying that foundation, like, your children and their children and the future generations are going to be that much further ahead because you chose, okay, I'm going to do something different. I'm going, even if this isn't my past, like, I'm going to be the first to make different choices and to just very intentionally pursue, I guess, what you feel like is God's calling on your life and what He's convicted you in and called you to. I
love that you added this so much, because regardless of, like, if you're not going for a big family, I think a lot of people, I don't want to say use it as an excuse, because people's pain is valid, but I feel like people will, quote unquote, use it as an excuse. Like, I came from this traumatic childhood. I don't want to carry the trauma on. I don't want to repeat this pattern. And you're right. You don't have to. Even if you haven't been modeled the way, you can find the way. You can find mentors. You can read books. You can make different decisions. And I remember my therapist telling me that at one point. Like, I don't want to paint a bad picture. I didn't have like a crazy childhood. You know, there were certain things though that I was kind of falling into this idea of like things I didn't want to repeat, and almost kind of subconsciously, unbeknownst to myself, assuming that the way things had been done in my family was just how I was going to do it. And she made me realize,
and nobody's
like,
a perfect parent. Like,
that
our
too.
parents weren't. We're not going to be perfect parents. Like, nobody's perfect.
Yes, but my therapist kind of walked me through exactly what we're talking about, making me realize, like, you know, you don't have to do that same thing, right? Like, you could just do it different. But it was this feeling of like, do I trust myself? But it's amazing, because even in the 4 short years, I'm not like a pro parent here, but the 4 short years I have been a parent, we have made different decisions in some of the areas that we wanted to do things differently. And so I'm so glad you added that on, because yes, I don't want people to let their fears stop them, when I can tell you now, like, having children is such a blessing. And having 11 of them is such a blessing.
Yes, it is.
So, yeah.
Coming from a large family is such a blessing.
It's so beautiful. Well,
especially when parents approach it intentionally.
Yeah. Well, we could go on, and maybe we'll have to have another conversation again. But for now, we got to run to our sale, and I need to pump before my boobs explode. So on that note, I will have Maria's links down below. Maria is also an incredible
photographer. She has taken some of, the only picture we have up in our house was taken by Maria. Like, she has taken some of my favorite photos. She's so talented. So check her out. Thanks for chatting with me, Maria.
Oh, thanks
Yeah.
for having me.
Yeah,
and
this was fun.
Yeah.
And I will, God willing, see you guys back here soon and on the new podcast with another interview soon in life. So yeah, that's it. Bye, guys.
Bye.